we have Marc Evanstein from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and he's going to talk to us about musical motion at different scales. So, if you're ready to rock.
I am, yeah. You can hear me okay still?
Yeah, sound is excellent. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's great to be here. I'm sorry that I couldn't see more of the conference. I have a new baby under 1 month old, so it's been a very busy time. But I'm really grateful to be here. And what I want to share with you today is a compositional technique which applies Fourier analysis in an unusual way, and also a computer program that I built to kind of explore that technique. So, so to start with, I guess I want to talk about Fourier analysis and the more typical way that we encounter it in a musical context. So I'm gonna just load up here. This is a single period of a trumpet waveform. So what I did is I took a recording of a trumpet and I zoomed in until I could kind of get one loop through the waveform, and it looks like this. And it sounds, hopefully if you can hear it, like this. Did everyone hear that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Of course, this doesn't really sound like a trumpet because it's missing the attack of the trumpet, and it's just the same waveform over and over. It's not varying the way that the sound of the trumpet varies. But so up here you see the waveform, and below you see the partials of the trumpet, the spectrum of the trumpet. And I won't spend too long on this because many of you probably are familiar with Fourier analysis. But what you can do in the program is you can remove some of the partials. And you can see that's the fundamental, second partial, third partial, fourth partial, and how they come together to make the sound. And also how they come together to make the shape of the trumpet waveform, to make that contour. And so what I was interested in doing was, since Fourier analysis is it's a mathematical tool, and you can apply it to any kind of shape which evolves over time, not just a waveform. Like an economist might use it to analyze the economy over time and the different periodicities within the economy. I thought I would try applying it to other musical contours that are a little bit more abstract. And so I'll show you what I mean here. And I'll start by loading up a MIDI file of Pop Goes the Weasel. So this is a graph of a sort of a graph over time, so you can apply Fourier analysis to it. But now I've graphed it against a musical staff. And so right here, this is middle C, this is D, E, G, E, C, G, C, and this is actually the melody of Pop Goes the Weasel. And if I play it, maybe I'll change the tempo here. That's Pop Goes the Weasel. But we can do the same thing actually here. We can play with the spectrum by adding or removing harmonics. And I think one of the most interesting things is to look at, well, what are the dominant partials if you analyze a melodic contour this way? And the biggest one is the fourth partial. And I thought, well, that's really interesting actually, because why is the fourth partial the strongest partial? The reason is because Pop Goes the Weasel is a melody in 4 phrases. And so you can see here that the Fourier analysis is revealing something about the structure of the melody. And the 8th partial too is, you can see that it's responsible here for contributing some of these gestures, the ba-da-da-dum. And again, if I put together some of these partials, if I put together the 4th partial and the 8th partial, I start to get something that kind of resembles the contour of the original melody. So, so for instance, if I play it back, and I'm going to change this number here, which is going to make it smoothly glide between the notes. But if I play it back, it now sounds like this. So this has something of the feel of Pop Goes the Weasel, and now I'm going to gradually add back in some of the other partials. So here we are, we're back at Pop Goes the Weasel, except it's kind of gliding around instead of stepping the way that it was before, because I changed that interpolation setting. But yeah, so this got me interested in, well, how could this be used in the context of a piece of music? So the next thing I did was, just double checking, yeah, okay. I did this with the famous Bolero melody. So, oops. I'll open that up. Oops. One more time. So here's the famous Bolero melody. I'll play it back pretty quickly here. And so I got interested in, well, what does this melody sound like if I remove all of the lower partials, meaning removing the overall contour of the melody? If I do that, then it sounds like this. I'll make it a little bit faster here. So that's the melody, but without any of the overall contour, just the local wiggling back and forth. On the other hand, I could remove all of the high frequency information. And now I get a melody which is just the contour. And none of the local ornamentation. So I made use of this in a piece that I wrote called Unraveled, and it's for percussion quartet and electronics. And so I'll play you a few excerpts of that. So here, the first excerpt is at the beginning, and at the beginning, we're just using this fast kind of wiggly version of the melody. Oops. So you can see that it mostly sounds like a single held note, but with a little bit of wiggling back and forth. A little later, it turns into this. should be listening for is the wiggling sound in the background. I've added a lot to it. I was trying to compose it. And I'll show you a little bit further in the piece. Now, at this point, you might start to be able to hear some of the actual bolero contours if you're really familiar with the melody. And this next excerpt is approaching the climax. So that's the moment where the bolero melody is kind of fully reconstructed. And I shifted it around into different things, but for the most part, that's the melody right there. And after that, so, we've been kind of gradually constructing it like this until here's the melody. After that, I start removing the faster moving wiggles. And it gradually becomes more like this. This kind of slip-sliding contour going up and down. And that sounds a little bit like this. So I'll stop there with that piece, but that's Unravel, and that's making use of the bolero melody and doing a break analysis and then resynthesis of the melody with some of the frequency information missing, either the low frequency information missing or the high frequency information missing. So the next piece I want to show you is, this is looking at the musical contour of pitch. But I've also built a program to look at a dynamic contour. So here I'm going to load up this is the second movement of Beethoven's 7th Symphony. And let's see. I think I'll do something like this. So what it's going to do here is it's going to break up the movement into a bunch of different bins and then find the root mean squared volume measure for each of those bins. So this is going to be a bin size of about a second. So basically, it's going to look at every second of the Beethoven audio and say, how loud is this? And then plot a graph of that over time. So that looks like this. And I actually loaded up here in Audacity. Again, I think, yes, okay. In Audacity, the exact same thing, and you can see if I line them up, that what's been loaded into my program is exactly this same contour that you see in Audacity, except it's a really colorless and five. And just to give you a sense of what we're looking at here, this moment right here is the first big climax of the movement. And this moment right here is another large climax that occurs later, and the middle section here, the A major section. So what I did for this piece is, again, I looked at it, and you can see that the second partial is the strongest partial. And the reason for that, if I remove all the second partials, is that it kind of maps to the two major climaxes, this climax and this climax over here. But so what I saw here is I saw there's this one kind of thing that we're charting. The volume is changed over time, and I'm using Fourier analysis to split that up into a bunch of different musical motions at different scales. And what I did was I orchestrated it so that each of these motions was in a different part of the orchestra. And I put them on top of each other so that they form a somewhat similar contour to the original contour. And that led me to this called Anamnesis. And what I want to show you is, I want to show you actually you can see that my piece, Anamnesis, and the original Beethoven share a similar dynamic contour. They both have climaxes in the same spot. And I'm going to show you the first climax right here. And so what you're going to hear is an orchestral technique which is different sizes overlapping with one another. You've got the faster waves, the medium-sized waves, the slower wave, very slow. And that sounds like this. So I think if I start from here. So I'll stop there for now because I think I'm about at time. But yeah, so this has been a kind of a tool that I've been exploring for some time. And these are some of the creative results that have come of them. But I think there's a lot more that you can do with this. One of the things is, one possible area for kind of future exploration is, you can see here, each of these partials, you see the phase of the partial, and that's really, really important. It's the phase of this second partial that causes it to align with this peak here and this peak right here. And I can imagine maybe a different iteration of this program where you could adjust the phase of the partial, as well as turn the amplitude on and off, so that maybe the peak could happen here instead of over here. Another possibility, which I've seen some other people have explored, and which I think it has a lot of promise, is to use a wavelength transform instead of a Fourier transform, because that gives you better time localization. But in some ways, I kind of like the sort of blunter tool of the Fourier transform. So, so yeah, I guess that's what I have for you all. Thanks so much, and if there's any questions, please feel free.
Thanks, Mark. So, anyone have any questions for Mark? Is there anyone online who has a question for Mark?
Well, I'm still trying to formulate questions in my head.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by it that I had to go to your website while you were speaking, and I downloaded the program and already opened it. So I find it fascinating that basically you're accessing the different spectrals and you can blend them in or out. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking analytically, not so much in terms of music making, but analytically, because that allows us to explore music in an entirely different way.
Yeah, you know, in the paper I talk a little bit about this, but I think of it as a little bit like, from an analytical point of view, it's a little bit like a mathematical version of Schenkerian analysis. And by that I just mean the fact that you're analyzing the music at different scales, right? And this has always been one of the fascinating things for me about music, is the way that it operates at different scales simultaneously. And so that's what's so interesting about this to me, is that you can break it down into the different scales at which it's operating, where the peaks might be happening at different scales. So
yes. Yeah, so thank you, and it's fantastic, and I'm sorry I didn't really ask a question, but thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So it seems like what you can do with this is sort of do, well, in the first instance, a kind of melodic analysis and kind of melodic feature extraction in some way, right? And
a little bit, yeah.
I mean, it seems to me like this would also be something useful in terms of computer-aided composition for real instruments. Let's say that you were going to make a very unusual set of, I don't know, like a set of melodic variations for piano or something like that. You could probably take a main melody and mess with your program until you got outputs that you sort of liked, that were, I don't know, like,
yeah, exactly. And well, I mean, the second
certain features, yeah.
Yeah, the second piece I played for you was for acoustic. I mean, it was for an orchestra, right? So if that. But I agree. You could use it as a melodic variation technique. And I think particularly if you were going to do that, it would be nice to be able to adjust the phase of the different partials,
right.
Because increasingly, I think the phase is one of the most important things to what gives the melody its character. Not just, like, exactly when the peaks happen is controlled by the phase.
So that second piece was a reading of a piece that you wrote for orchestra? Not you.
Well, so it's an orchestra piece, but that's actually a computer rendering of the orchestra piece. Yeah, I've had a reading of part of it, but not of the entire thing.
That's why I was confused. So that's done with, so what you've done is like written a kind of wrapper on top of this, I guess it's a Chuck engine that renders the audio? Is that what's going on? Your Python libraries do the munging and
well, certainly the orchestra piece was a process of, yeah, I used some Python libraries I built to generate the music notation, and that was a whole separate thing. The program itself does have this program itself is a Python program that has Chuck running inside of it just to play those little triangle waves that go up and down.
And then from your program, could you output, say, I don't know, like a MIDI file that you could then open in Sibelius or Finale or something like that? Does it only read MIDI?
But it's a good idea.
Write it? Because it reads MIDI, right? But it won't necessarily write it, right?
That's true. Yes. I mean, it's this. This is one of those situations where I've created a program that I'm the only person who's used so far. So that's a really good thing to have the program do, but I haven't built it to do that yet.
Okay, because you could do that, and then actually, or make it like a plugin within Finale, which would be kind of fascinating in a way. So, which is where the open music and Finale sort of collaboration was, I think, originally meant to go so many years ago, and I think that's kind of dead now. But there was this very brief moment where open music and Finale kind of worked together a little bit, and so anyway, it's kind of fascinating. Anyone have any questions?
I was wondering, like, maybe you applied to some other composers' pieces, and was there any specific differences, like between composers or some carriers or kind of thing? And I was wondering if, because you used some Beethoven's or Bach's examples, so was it particularly worked well for the works, or?
Oh, that's such a good question, but I don't have a good answer to it, because I haven't tried with lots of different composers and compared it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Beethoven and the Ravel, I just chose them because I love those pieces.
Oh.
And I kind of felt like I could imagine something interesting musically happening there. But yeah, I wonder how different composers. I think there's a lot of potential for seeing, how do these contours differ from composer to composer in the way that they work.
Yes, maybe we could try like some contemporary pieces or something.
Yeah.
Yes, interesting. So.
Or even Mozart, right? Late Mozart has so many sequences in it. Like that's the knock on late Mozart, is just endless sequences. That would make a very periodic looking analysis, I would think, right?
Oh, I was going to say there's one other thing that's probably worth mentioning about this. When I was showing the Pop Goes the Weasel example, in all of these examples, Fourier analysis is often done in kind of windows, right? You cut the sound up into different windows, and you apply the Fourier transform to each window. But what I'm always doing is I'm looking at the entire thing and doing a kind of a single window, that's the entire thing. And there's a kind of implication to that you're thinking of the melody as like looping, which I think makes more sense with some pieces than others. So like with Pop Goes the Weasel, that's like a melody that you could imagine going over and over and over and over. But I think that this analysis makes a little bit more sense. Actually, with the bolero too, I think this may have actually been one of the reasons they chose the bolero, is because it's a melody that repeats over and over and over and over. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that that's kind of an underlying assumption, is that the melody repeats.
Questions? All right, thanks. Fantastic, crazy project, awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.